country from last 15, 16 years. Still, I don't know what is the correct process people get admission for and what is the criteria is. Not like our way that you score exam, clear an exam, you got admission. Things are much complicated here. So I thought that to benefit the community, uh, we should have an event where people who got admitted in good universities, we can hear from them what their experience is, what they did, so that it can be useful for in the community. So for that, I'm very thankful to the four achievers who are here, who got admission in the top school in the US. So their name is Arjun. He is in the left hand side. He is going to start Yale University. He graduated from Sharon High School. Then we have Shana. Sanah graduated from Westborough, right? Yeah, Westford, yeah. And then she is going to start in Case Western. Then we have Agam. He graduated from Westborough High School and he's going to start in Emory University. And then we have Rick. He graduated from Mass Academy and he is going to start in CMU from this time. So I'll not take too much of time. I will just start. Like you guys can start from like Arjun. You can start. Tell what your experience is and how your process is, and then we can look for a question from the audience. And that some people have questions. So.
Sure. Yeah, I guess a good place to start, since you have kind of establishing like what kind of classes we took. So in Sharon High, you're not allowed to take AP classes until your 11th grade year. So in 9th and 10th grade, I took honors classes. And then in 11th grade, I took 3 AP classes. And in 12th grade, I took 6 AP classes and out of 6 classes. So around.
Yeah, so we were allowed to take our first AP class our sophomore year. So I took one sophomore year. I took, I think, 4 junior year and then 5 senior years.
Yeah, we same thing as Arjun. We weren't allowed till junior year or 11th grade. So before that, yeah, definitely. I think it was important that you take as high level classes as you're comfortable with and as you can, right? So if that's honors classes, or if your school has a different system, just like challenge yourself. And then after that, yeah, I took a few APs. I didn't like those 2 just because the APs that our school offered didn't interest me that much. And so I think I try to find a balance, but yeah, definitely always take the most challenging courses you can.
Actually, my experience was completely different. The school I attend, the Massachusetts Academy for the Math and Science, they only have students in 11th and 12th grade. And they don't run AP programs, they run different programs. My previous school, Acton Boxborough, similar to the other schools, doesn't offer AP classes until 11th grade. So if I think about it, I actually never taken an AP class, but I've taken about like 6 or 7 exams just self-studying. And the good thing about Massachusetts Academy of Math and Science is even though the junior year classes are not considered APs, they're at the same difficulty, so you learn the same content and a bit more. And in senior year, you get to take all courses at the local Worcester Polytechnic Institution. And that actually is really helpful in terms of getting a lot of this really useful.
So like just the summary of that, you guys like feel that for the admission process, AP courses are the biggest factor that in the admission process. That's why you guys started with AP, or what is the reason to start?
So I brought it up to begin with because I think it's important one of the most important things for college is to show that you're challenging yourself with rigorous courses, whether that means AP classes or whether that means taking classes at WPI, for example. Your college admissions are going to contextualize where you're applying from. So they'll take into account what is offered at your school and if you're challenging yourself to the most you can. And as long as you're doing that, I think that's a good sign, a good indicator of colleges want to see that because that's a good indicator of if you'll be successful in college as well. So that's why I started off with that.
Yeah, and I think another thing with like any of your stats, like your scores, your GPA, SATs, like that's what gets you in the door. Like, you know, to like be a competitive candidate at any top university, you need a good GPA, you need a good SAT score, unless you go test optional, which I think a lot of schools are doing that now. But that's like the first thing. And like I think we'll talk about later in the extracurriculars and stuff. That's gonna like, set you apart. That might get you from a selection of 10 to 1 student, right? But the first thing that they might not even look at you if you have like a 2.5 GPA, right?
Yeah, I would agree, I think. But it's like, yeah, at least in my view, it's not the most important. It is a deciding factor on whether you are going to be considered by those schools, but it's not going to be something that puts you over the top necessarily, because there are a million other people who have taken more APs than me, done more like challenging classes, but that's kind of just the baseline. And like we were, I think, all talking about, it's just challenge yourself at the level you can wherever you are. Right, at Westborough, we didn't have a lot of APs. Some kids self-studied, some kids didn't, but I just always made sure to challenge myself with whatever course I was offered.
Yeah, I think the key thing to keep in mind is it doesn't actually matter the AP name or whatever name you're giving, because the thing in US is not that the courses aren't standardized. But one school may call it AP could be honest for another school. So the objective is make sure that whatever courses are available, you're taking the max courses like at that level. As when it comes to AP tests, I actually found their greater utility in providing college credits. As a lot of institutions give a lot of college credits. For example, I was talking about how my Westborough Polytechnic gave me credits to those courses, but my APs have also provided me with 6 hours of grant. So if I'm going to really talk about the utility towards AP, obviously challenge yourselves with the max courses to be recognized by college. But I would honestly say APs are really more for skipping out of these intro-level courses and graduating earlier and ultimately spending less money in college. When it comes to college acceptances, it's a little varying because even colleges recognize that not all APs are offered across all schools. So they can't use that as a benchmark to compare. But the AP test is recognized as a standardized test. And because of that, it will provide you coursework at your respective university, depending on the university. That also varies.
Okay. So the first question that comes in my mind is that when I look for the college application processes, when should I start the college application process? So like when prospective students are looking for, when they should start looking for, or so from your experience, when you start taking the college seriously, that which college should I go, what subject should I major in? So if you can reflect on that thing from your experience, that would be nice.
Yeah, definitely. So like, I think as soon as you get to high school, you should be thinking about like what kind of school you want to go to, right? And obviously you shouldn't have like a list of schools in 9th grade, but just a general idea, like kind of what do you want to study? Maybe if you want to do STEM, that means take advanced STEM classes. If you want to do humanities, maybe take more writing classes. And so you kind of keep that in the back of your mind with choosing what classes you're taking, also what kind of extracurriculars you're doing. And then as for the college application process, I started probably late my 11th grade year, which is when I really started to look into what colleges I wanted to apply to, what are the essay deadlines or the scholarship deadlines, etc. And kind of that summer, so I was busy that summer, but when I got back from the camp that I attended, that's when I started to brainstorm my essays. And I made sure my standardized testing was wrapped up before I entered my 12th grade year, because I think that a lot of your 12th grade year is going to be spent writing essays and doing classes. So you don't want to really be taking the SAT during that time. I don't know if other panelists agree with that, but that was sort of my experience with it.
So the Common App, I started around the same time as you. That's like the application where you're gonna apply to all your schools, most of your schools on. So that most people are gonna start like maybe the summer going into 12th grade. I think you want to start seriously considering where you want to go to college, the schools you want to apply to around junior year, because junior year is when you're going to be taking your SAT score. So depending on what school you're trying to target, you want to try to get an SAT score. People say you want like around the 50th to 75th percentile of that school to like be a competitive candidate. Because again, the GPA, the SAT score, they're not everything, but they are going to make you kind of comparative to the other people who are also applying. So that's something you want to think about your junior year. Then letters of recommendation are also something you want to start thinking about your junior year, because most likely it's going to be one of your junior year teachers who write it for you. So really building those relationships. And now looking back, like who do you have the biggest connection to? Who can write a strong essay on your behalf, and who's probably from one of the subject areas that you're applying to. So like I'm going to be a neuroscience major, so I asked my AP chemistry teacher for it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a tough question because the college application process in like the US is so all over the place. Like technically you could start a week before and just write everything, put it together. I think the one thing that was a good point was letters of recommendation. I kind of dropped the ball and I waited for the last minute, and I think I got solid ones. Obviously you can't read a letters of recommendation ever, but I was able to get good ones because I had good connections with my teachers. But I do wish I had thought about it a little bit sooner, right? But first time going through the process, I didn't really know. So that's one thing. But then I think I kind of agree. Almost everybody, if you really want to be a competitive candidate, you should start thinking about different essays, not just your personal statement, but also supplementals over the summer going into 12th grade, because really that's when you have finished almost all of your high school career at that point. And so you can start at least brainstorming ideas for essays and things like that. And one of the things about college applications that I learned is that to stand out, you have to be creative. And creativity a lot of the time can take time, where to come up with good essay ideas and to put them together in interesting and engaging formats, you have to take that time to at least have that idea. Like for me, my personal statement, I started getting the idea together in like June, July, but then I didn't even finish the version that I sort of had as my final version during the regular decision rounds until December. Like I applied with a different version in November, and in December, I completely sort of worked through it again. And so like everything, it's a constant process as you're applying, but you do want to start early, at least thinking about things, especially your essays. And just really quickly on the SAT thing, I recommend getting it out of the way as soon as possible. The SAT is really fundamental stuff where most kids can do it by 9th grade, 10th grade. And I got it done before I even went into my junior year. And it was a huge relief because I didn't have to worry about any of it. And it allowed me to focus more on my classes and on my essays down the road.
Yeah, so like many have said before, the actual like college application process, writing the essays, taking the SATs, all this stuff should happen like early to like late junior year, and probably wrap it up like middle or like before college apps in senior year, right? But I think like you can't actually just do all that stuff then. You really have to think about which types of schools you want to apply to much earlier than that. Because certain schools look for certain types of math. Like if you want to go to a tech-heavy school, Caltech, MIT, CMU, these schools are going to try to make sure like, hey, have you put yourself in STEM? Have you not only gone beyond like your school, like calculus, have you tried to learn multivariable calculus? Have you engaged in programming competitions? Like depending on what type of major you're going into or what type of school you're going into, schools look favorably in that. But not all schools look at it the same. For example, like a tech school will really look into the technical aspect and the technical abilities, but a liberal arts schools might focus on a more well-rounded education. So you take any humanities, you take any history. So I think you should really think about which types of schools you want to go into as early as possible. So then you can structure your high school experience to go down that path. And that'll probably make you a more valuable candidate for a lot of these schools, because not all schools want the same thing. All because one person made it to Harvard doesn't mean they're going to make it to MIT, and vice versa. These schools have very different criteria of what they're looking for. So if you can kind of narrow it down to what types of schools you want to go to, you can make sure your high school time is being spent on really preparing yourself to enter that kind of community.
Really quickly, I think I have a pretty salient story to that point where you want to know at least kind of where you want to go, right? So for me, early on, I knew I didn't want to stay in New England just because I'm from Phoenix and I like the weather down south better. So I ended up going to school in Atlanta, but at the time I really was thinking about California. And so I was looking into UC schools, UCLA, UC Berkeley. But one of the things I messed up on was I just put those, names on a list of colleges I was thinking about applying to, but I didn't do a lot of research into those schools to see what they were looking for. And actually what happened was because I didn't do that research, I didn't realize there was an art department applied to schools in California through the UC system. So I never took an art class because I'm not going into art or anything like that. Why would I need to? And it ended up being I couldn't apply to UCLA because I didn't have that minimum art department that they wanted. So yeah, that was kind of just lesson learned, and it's okay. I'm happy where I ended up. But I think if everybody here could learn one thing, I think completely agreeing with them. Research your schools early on. Just know generally what they want from you and make sure you hit those baselines. So at when the time comes, even if you don't want to apply, you're still a candidate and you're still a high level candidate.
Thank you. So like the common thing that I hear from that is the common apps and essays. All of us applies to multiple schools. So undergrad, if you are applying to 10 different schools, how much you like take your essays and change it, and like how much you did on those parts? Like,
Yeah, sure. So yeah, there's a common app essay which pretty much goes to all schools except the UCs and MIT, and there are probably a few other exceptions. But in addition to that, there's a few supplementals per school. It depends on the school. For example, Yale had like 8 supplementals, which is a lot. Other schools maybe have just 1. And I'd say it's a good idea, which is I read this piece of advice online, is to have like a few stories that reveal something unique about you or something that you find memorable, that you think is memorable, and kind of just writing those to fit like just like a general prompt, like tell me more about yourself. And then that's kind of like a good way that you can rework that essay into a bunch of different prompts. For example, there was a prompt that I had to write, name a community that's important to you and what you've done to it. Right. So that's like a pretty general prompt, but so I answered that prompt and I was able to use that in various different essay prompts for many different schools. So yeah.
Yeah, so what I did actually my junior year is I had a notes app on my phone, and anytime I thought of something, I wrote it down. So, like little memories, events that happen that you think could turn into something bigger, because not everyone has this amazing life story where they were like at like near death experience where they realized who they were. You know, like not everyone gets to do that. One of my things was I dressed up as an Easter bunny and I played with kids in my neighborhood, right? And I wrote about that, how it impacted me, how it impacted kids, things like that, where you're not only talking about what you're doing and how it's helping you, but how you're helping people around you. They look for that dual aspect. And so I think for each school I applied to, I spent around like, I don't have like an hour limit. I think it was different for each school, but like first you want to research the school, right? See what kind of students they look for. If you know someone who goes to that school, talk to them. They can tell you something unique that you can't maybe get from just looking at the website. So things like that, and then trying to incorporate those unique things into your essays, because college admissions counselors, they read a lot of essays, right? If your essay is generic, they're gonna know. You know, if you just briefly looked at their website, put down like a common professor's name, like they're not gonna think you really want to go to that school. They get that idea that you want to go by really showing that passion and putting that forward. And so, and they can tell. So I think spend a lot of time revising your essays. If you have someone who you trust who can read it, that really helped me. But yeah.
Essays is definitely, in my eyes, the biggest part of the college application process in America, just because, like we've kind of talked about and sort of come to a consensus up here, almost every candidate at these top schools has good GPA, good SAT, good extracurriculars, but really what it comes down to is, can you use your essays to make an admissions officer really root for you and really say that I want this student going to my college? And I think for me, I kind of I started early, as early as I could, at least brainstorming ideas. I'm not somebody who writes, like takes a long time to write. So I thought of as many ideas as I could, and then I started writing to each one. And what that helped me do was a couple things that made me realize a couple things about myself, because that introspection doesn't happen a lot throughout high school. You don't really think about who am I as a person. So starting really helped me. And then also one thing that really helped me was I actually used a theme to sort of center my entire college application around. So for me, it was using higher education to help my community, to help my peers, to help my generation. For somebody who might be going into, a STEM-based field, it might be something different, like, exploring space and trying to become the best they can at that. But using that single theme to center all of my essays around, so that this admissions officer would look at me as like a holistic person, but somebody who would fit well into a class. I think that really helped me, because once I started writing my essays, I was able to center everything around that theme. And when you read them all together, it really gave a cohesive sense of who I was. So a theme is a big thing I would definitely recommend. And also just making your writing as simple as possible, because admissions officers, they read a lot of papers. If you try to be pretentious or use big words all the time just to like get attention or stand out, you're actually gonna blend in, I would say. So having simple writing, but then the meaning or whatever it is behind that, having that stand out is what's really important, I think, in the essay process. And then last thing is for the supplementals, I actually didn't change mine that much. I just kind of adapted them like a little bit here and there. And I try to find prompts from schools that were very, very similar. But I actually do wish I had done a little bit more work in making each application a little bit different for each school. Because I think that would have helped me sort of in that admissions office that I fit in better to that school. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, like everyone said before me, right? Essays are a huge portion of the college admissions process. But one thing I would say that I know I struggled with during the application process is often we stress a lot about them and we spend a lot of time on them. I applied to 16 schools, and for that I had to write over 50 essays. And if you write each essay from scratch, that is like almost impossible to do. So I think what Arjun said at the beginning about creating a couple of key themes, like 9 to 10 stories, and then repackaging them and rewording them in different essays, I think that's probably the best way to go about it. And then another thing is the revisions. It is impossible to revise 50 essays like 5 times and then submit them over. Like maybe it is possible, but you're not doing anything else that year. So what I would recommend is you always have to try to complete the essay to the best of your ability. But after that, don't touch it anymore. The thing with an essay, like compared to like another like more objective measure, is an essay can be interpreted differently by different people. One person may look at an essay and it might move them to tears, while another one's just like, like it's okay. Like that's just the thing about essays. So there is really no point just over stressing. Oh, how did this comma fit into the overarching theme? Really, I think all you should do is create an essay that you're proud of, that feels like you feel proud of, you feel like you've shown something new about yourself that you haven't shown anywhere else in your application, and leave it at that. Because at the end of the day, hypothetically, you could have written the best essays in the world, but let's say your college admissions officer had a bad day. There are actual stories of this. People, college admissions officers have had bad days, had flus, and then reject people en masse, even reading through their essays and stuff. So there's just a certain level of control that you cannot manage, and you just got to do the best with that, and you can't like push it beyond that point.
Okay, I'll just have last point on the essays. For the essays, you guys worked with just with yourself, family, or you look for some external helps, or some companies which offer help with essays. If you guys used it, can you recommend some so that people want to look for that, they can get advantage of that?
Yeah, sure. So when I wrote my essays, I kind of just kept it to myself. I wrote it and revised it a lot, but I definitely read a bunch of essays online because I don't know if this is like a good thing or a bad thing, but for me, I found that having like exemplars of seeing essays that I got in, it really helped me a lot. Obviously, that doesn't mean like you should try like use their story or like try to rework it to fit yours. I just liked it for inspiration and kind of see what kind of things do I need to be doing, right? So I think a few good websites for that are College Vine, that's pretty well known. The College Essay Guy, I don't know if you guys use them, but I use that for a bunch of different like brainstorming ideas and also just admitted students' essays. And then I think just Googling like school plus like essays that I got in, right? I think that's generally a good idea.
Yeah, I also use College Vine a lot. They literally have every single supplemental essay that you can get, and they have a good way to write them all. Another thing that I really use with my guidance counselor, like I think every school, right, it has like a free guidance counselor for you to use. Mine was super helpful. Like anytime I had a question or I just wanted her to read it for me, she would do it, and it's good feedback. You know, she's also read like tons of these essays, so she kind of gets that perspective of a college admissions officer. So I think those are really good resources. I also I don't remember the name, but there's some online like places where you can submit your essay and they have like professional like college like counselors who will go and read it for you. So I think if you Google that, you'll find some resources for that.
Yeah, I got where we actually did hire like a college counselor, but in the end, it was actually not a help for me at all. Maybe it's because I had the expectation, like a different expectation, but you know, they didn't tell me about like UCLA's art thing. They didn't really help me that much with my writing. They kind of just were like, it felt like being a yes man. So from that, the biggest thing I would say is when you're initially writing your essay, like Arjun was saying, keep it to yourself a little bit, where really pour yourself into that essay. Don't look for external help at time. And then down the line, you can obviously get help with editing, trying to repackage something and make it sound better or make it appeal to somebody who's not yourself. I think that can be really helpful. And I actually, again, had a converse experience with my guidance counselor. I got assigned her at the beginning of the year. My old one left, the one who knew me for 3 years. And so really hastily in like 2 months, I had to make a connection with this person because guidance counselors also write you a letter of recommendation. And with my essays, she tried to help me, but because she didn't know me that well, there wasn't really a ton she could do. So what I did was I kind of relied on family members. I have a cousin back in California and a couple other cousins across the state who have already been to college, good colleges. And so they helped me write my essays, and because they knew me well, they helped me really get my message across and kind of package myself in a way that would appeal to somebody who wasn't, you know. So I think even if you don't have access to those resources don't turn out, just relying on people, even your parents. But especially like, I think for me, like cousins was helpful. It might be an aunt or an uncle for somebody else, but those types of people can help because they know you in a way you don't really know yourself from sort of a third party perspective, and they can help you kind of write from that perspective as well and help somebody like who you are, I guess, as a person.
Yeah. So there are a lot of resources online about college essay writing, but one thing I would caution is college essays and just the entire college admissions is a really oversaturated market. So a lot of these guys will tell you, hey, we're gonna write an essay for you to get you into Stanford. but that is not the case at all. Like it's filled with all sorts of like fraudulent products. And even on a lot of these free websites, right? Like things that essays that you say, like they say, oh, this student gone to Caltech, this student gone to MIT or something like that. Thing is, if a lot of people copy these trends, suddenly the uniqueness of this essay goes away. So what I would suggest is look to these things for inspiration, look to these things for ideas, but don't rely too heavily on these resources. The best way to write an essay, through my experience, just write something yourself. And then with me, I go to a pretty solid school. So my English teacher actually helped me revise a lot of my essays. And your English teacher or whoever teachers you talk with, they should know you for a couple of years. They can say, hey, this sounds like your personality. This will definitely show this aspect of your personality. But if you want to also try to get more college specific details, I also found it useful to reach out to current undergraduates at the university. And a lot of these undergraduates are relatively like chill, relatively easygoing, and they'll tell you their experience and their advice when it comes to college admissions. And this is free and also non-fraudulent help that most of the internet will provide you.
So like I can move on to essay to the next topic that I had in mind is that when we look for schools to apply for, how many number of schools you have applied for? I know Rick said 16. So how many number of schools you have applied for? What is the criteria that you have put that like Arjun, like Agam want to go to California, so it is his criteria. So what is the criteria you put in so that people can get ideas from that too? Think about the number of schools here. So we cannot apply to all 500 schools. So we have to think about the number. So what is your optimization criteria?
Yeah, so I mean, I knew that I wanted to go to a good school for computer science and math, but I also wanted a good liberal arts education because I see a lot of value in that. Just kind of like not being one-dimensional, but also gaining skills in like writing and speaking and presentations and so on. So I kind of looked for a mix of both. I'd say my initial list was about 15 schools, and I'd say that's probably like on the higher end. But I only applied to 3 schools early, and as a result, I got into Yale early, so then I didn't have to apply to all 15. I didn't apply to that many more. But the 15 that I chose were schools that I knew would prepare me to be like a better leader in the future through liberal arts, or like just through good other interdisciplinary fields, or they were just like good at math and CS.
Yeah, I applied to 14 schools, I think. So I was pre-med, my major's neuroscience, so I was looking for schools that were either known for that or had good hospitals nearby, like something where I could, observe, chat with doctors, things like that. That was important to me. Maybe schools with a good medical school, because those kind of schools, they have good research going on. You can work with professors. So those were my criteria. And that was the main thing. Like when I chose Case Western, I knew it had a great medical school, and that's the main reason. And it has like 4 or 5 hospitals nearby. So like look for that. Like that doesn't even just have to be the school. It can be the community around the school that can make you want to go there.
Yeah, I applied to, I don't even remember, maybe 14, but honestly, I feel like that was too much. I think the max, in my opinion, should be like 15. I know people who apply to like 20 plus schools, and it's just madness, because the thing is, at least the way I see it, if you can't see yourself going to a school, there's not really much of a reason to apply there. You're just doing it to kind of like kid yourself, I guess. So I think make a list and really look at the criteria of, does it have, like they were saying, the majors you want? Does it have the things you want around campus, not just on campus, but off campus? Like for me, it was, I wanted to be in a city and in a warmer climate. That was one thing, just because those are 2 things I haven't really experienced for a while. And so I kind of got that with Emory. It's in Atlanta, but I didn't really apply to any schools that didn't fit that criteria, because for me, I knew I wouldn't have wanted to go there. So why waste my time and waste an admissions officer's time? And then the other thing I would say is just always look at what's the best fit for you. Don't just apply somewhere because it's a big name or something like that. That's a mistake I feel like some people make. Apply there because you could see yourself going there. And that's also going to raise your chances, because if you really truly believe you can go there, that's probably going to reflect more in your application, and an admissions officer is going to see that, and they'll be more likely to accept it.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I applied for 16 schools, but I did it in a very naive approach. I went on the US News, saw the top 16, and I applied like that. But I do not recommend this to anybody. This is a pretty poor decision. Like those before me have said, you got to apply to a school based on your interest and your major and any other criteria. Do you want to be far from home? Do you want to be close to home? But I think another key factor to think about is, what do you want to do in the future? For example, if you just want to go get an undergraduate degree, there are schools that they send recruiters and they'll get you a good six-figure job straight out of college. And they're not even the top schools. Like I know WPI, they had a straight to Amazon recruitment process, and people were coming in with like a 120K salary. On the other hand, other schools, like they have better grad school programs and you can see a long-term future and get a higher developed degree. So you got to think about these like different long-term options, which can save you money while still offering you the options provided. Because a lot of these like big name brand schools, CMU included, you don't have to specifically go there. This is the thing you're targeting. If you just want to work at a fan company, there are much cheaper options available. If you want to try to get extensive into research, go to a research school. If you want to, as Arjun said, if you want to go for a liberal arts education, go for a liberal arts type school. So you really have to think about what kind of future do you want to plan out with your life. If you want to go to grad school afterwards, think about which schools will help you build a grad school profile. Which ones will help you develop that. If you just want to work afterwards, you don't always have to go to the biggest name to get an easy job. There are much more options, and it really just depends on what you want post college and like after
Rick, we can continue with this slide also, like just to have. The other thing is that the number of schools we applied for, then like in your case, once you got the admit, do you go with like criteria that you put in like scholarships, things like that, or just the ranking that you guys choose to go with that?
So personally, with me, my three main options were Columbia, Cornell, and Carnegie Mellon. And I'm gonna be honest, in my initial feed through, US2's rankings, I was like, okay, Columbia's easy. But actually, the more I looked into it, I realized, okay, this is not a school for me. Core curriculum, I'm a STEM guy. I cannot study art history for like 3 semesters. And that is a requirement as a part of a core curriculum at a liberal arts school. So ultimately, I chose which one offered me like the best long-term deal. At Carnegie Mellon, they gave me a year's worth of credit, so I can graduate a year early. It's really good with computer science, machine learning, a lot of my shared interests. There are no humanities like there are some humanities requirements, but I can clear that in the first year, which I will love to do. And my long-term plans are anyways to go for grad school, PhD. Still not a liberal arts school, but what I see is the research and the kinds of programs they do really sets up the students for grad school. So I was much more wise in my post-acceptance decisions, and I really looked into a lot of factors. Where do I want to take my life in this direction? What do I know I'll hate in the future and want to avoid? And I used this all to make like an informed judgment and decided Carnegie Mellon was the place for me.
Regret minimization event.
Yeah. Create a whole Excel.
Yeah, so unlike him, I'm actually very unsure on what I want to do after college. I just knew what I wanted to do with the next 4 years. You can get a quality education. I want to, if possible, continue playing soccer at the collegiate level, which I play right now in high school. And then also I knew I wanted to study abroad. And Emory was one school that, so I like didn't even think about applying there until late December. And then I kind of did some research into it. And it was like, yeah, it's a great school, but it also has all these other things that kind of are on my list, with being in and near a city, which means there's opportunities after school to do a lot of things, which I don't really know what I want to do yet. There's opportunity for me to play soccer there. There's opportunity to study abroad. So that's how I did my criteria, was what do I want to do in college? I really wanted to think about that experience. And then obviously just being a really good school. I'm thinking of going in business even after there's lots of good opportunities there. So I knew whatever happened after those 4 years, I would be fine. And so, yeah, Emory, like that's kind of actually how I decided to apply. And I actually decided to apply ED2, which meant once I got in, I withdrew all my other applications. And in the end, I'm actually very happy with that decision because it fits in well with who I am. And I know for the next 4 years, at least, I'll be able to do what I want. And hopefully in those next 4 years, I'll be able to discover what I want to do after, which is one thing Emory offers their students, where first 2 years you go in undeclared, you really get to explore yourself. So for some people, they know STEM is what they want to do. They're really into that. I didn't really have that. So now for the next 2 years, I can kind of really figure myself out, and whatever happens afterward, I'm sure I'll be happy because they give you the opportunity to explore and really understand what you want to do.
I think there were a lot of things I wanted to my decision to pick my school. Cost was definitely one of them. Knowing that I wanted to go probably to either grad school or medical school after I'm done with these 4 years, I was like, okay, so if I'm going to be spending money, then do I really want to spend like $90,000 at a private school right now? So that was definitely a big thing. I looked at scholarships from public schools where I was like getting much like reasonable price, right? So those were all things I looked at when I was applying. Case Western had a lot of good resources for me. And I said this before, but like the hospitals around were a really big thing. Like there's 4 hospitals walking distance from campus. And so that really made me like, okay, if I'm going here, I'm not only getting a good education, but now I'm getting to observe doctors. I get clinical experience. I can work with patients. There's so many homes there, retirement homes, all sorts of things. So that made me really excited to choose to pick Western, and I think that was the leading force in my decision.
Yeah, I think similar to what some of the others said, I really wanted to go to a school where I could sort of discover myself. I know right now that I want to do something in STEM, probably in CS and math, and I'm also interested in economics. And I think a good thing about Yale is similar to, I think it was Emory, you don't have to declare a major until your sophomore year. So that gives you a lot of room for exploration. Do you want to take this? Which way do you want to take? If you can take, you have a lot more freedom to take classes you're interested in and sort of develop new interests in college. You don't have to like choose a major right from the get-go and then commit yourself and end up you don't like it later on. So that was a huge part. I also like I did not like Columbia for the same reason as you. They have a really strong core curriculum, and I don't want to be forced to take classes I don't want to. I want to have the freedom to choose classes myself, and that does mean taking humanities that I find interesting. I just didn't want to have to take a class, like a writing class that I don't want to take, right? And then also I considered like the people, like I think Yale really prides itself on being a collaborative school, and that's something that I really value. I didn't really want to go to a super competitive school where people are always like competing for certain things. And obviously that's going to be true at every college, but I think Yale does a really good job of providing advising for undergraduates. It's a lot of personal attention that you get, and that's something that I really value as well.
So the other thing that few points that I had in my mind is that I know Rick did some summer research. So in your experience, how much you think like summer research, I know there are opportunity to do summer research in NASA, ASE, American Society for Engineering Education. You did with some professors. So if you get a chance to work on this junior year summer research experience, how was your experience, and can you recommend it for other people to explore that?
Yeah, absolutely. Junior year, I got accepted to the Aspiring Summer Science Internship Program. And through that program, we got to actually research quantum algorithms and actually help develop a couple of novel quantum algorithms that we later ran and tested on AGNE computers. And we wrote a paper on it and got accepted to IEEE. So the thing is, what I found is, first off, doing a research thing really boosts your, at least for me as a STEM person. It shows, okay, my STEM skills are not only limited to just taking tests or just going off in class. Hey, I can actually contribute to the field of STEM, and that really distinguishes you overall as a STEM student. But I think also for me, it helped me find a direction and an interest that I am interested in pursuing. Because of this internship, I knew, okay, math, physics, computer science, this is where it's at. I gotta go into these kinds of fields. And even though I'll still say 3 fields is still a lot, it narrowed in a lot of the subjects for me. So I think doing this research not only helped me like build my profile and build my knowledge as a student, but also helped me narrow in on what kinds of schools I want to go into. I really want to go to a technical school, really want to kind of build this kind of background. And not only about like with colleges, but like doing research can help build a long-term profile. As I said, like grad schools are looking for research actually above like college and GPA. Most grad schools, MIT, EECS, they look for the number of publications and what kind of conferences or what impact conferences. They look for these more than just your 3.7 in college. They really value this. And it can help you also develop other things. A lot of startups are just built off of unused research ideas. So I would say research is something you should do if you just want to grow your abilities as a STEM student. It's not really just about college or just one thing or the other. It can just overall make you a better person and help you find and narrow in.
Yeah, so I would agree that you definitely want to utilize your summers if you want to be a competitive candidate. For me, I never did research. I was going to around my sophomore year. I used to want to be an astrophysicist, and so I emailed some professors at Tufts, and I was going to my next summer, but then sort of during that year, it was a pandemic year, and I kind of realized I don't really have that much of an interest in pursuing physics professionally. So instead, I did a startup competition. We won, and so like through that entire process, we did a startup accelerator. I learned a lot about entrepreneurship, business, and that world. And I realized this is something that I enjoy a lot more. Like whether I'm better at it or not, that was kind of like not really a factor for me. It's something I enjoyed a lot more because I got to work with and help people, right? The core sort of idea of entrepreneurship is solving problems for people. And so through that, the next summer, I actually got an offer and I went to do an internship at a completely virtual startup company called All Here. They work in education, ed tech specifically. And during that process, it was a paid internship. I just got to sit in and really learn from some of the top people in their fields. You know, people who had gone and studied education at Harvard and things like that. And I just got to learn directly under them. And I realized that this world of business is something that interests me a lot more than some of the other stuff I was thinking of pursuing early on. So in that way, the summer experience was really, really valuable for me because I learned about myself. I learned that this is something that I really want to do because it gave you, like he was talking about, that real world experience and what you're actually going to be doing once you graduate from college, what that field actually looks like. And the next summer, I actually tried an engineering internship because I was like, maybe engineering is something I might be interested in. And I really did not have that good a time. And so I kind of realized after that, I don't want to become an engineer. So yeah, I think it's valuable because it helps you stand out as a candidate, but it can also really show you what that's like in the real world and what you might want to do once you're done.
Yeah. So I kind of spent my summers trying to volunteer in as many hospitals as I could, in as many different fields as I could. So the summer going into my senior year, I volunteered at Mass General Hospital, and they placed me in a cancer infusion center. So I was kind of like helping patients, taking them to like their rooms if they needed any food or anything. So I was kind of just like observing the environment. And I really liked that experience. And then because of that, I was really into like the whole like, cancer thing. So this summer I went to shadow my aunt who lives in New Jersey. And so she has her own, she's a, why can't I? I'm going to oncologist. So she's an oncologist. She has her own practice. So I went to shadow her. And that was a really nice experience, you know, kind of being side by side with the doctor. And I honestly wish I had done that experience sooner. Like, if I had like wrote in any essays about how much I love that experience, I like, you know, things like that. You can really draw from that in your essays because these are real life experiences. You're working with people. And like from that experience, I was like I'm so kind of caught up into like what's next is 4 years of undergrad, then medical school and this. But when you go and you work with real life doctors, you get to see like the actual day in the life. And that was a really, really nice experience. I do wish I had done some sort of research or work in the lab. That I never got to do, but you know, hopefully I get to do that in college.
Yeah, so I think how I use my summers is definitely like a very big part of my application and kind of made me stand out, I'd say, because a lot of the other stuff that I did was similar to like what other kids were doing, but I think I use my summers pretty well. So in ninth grade, I think all my summers that they were all pretty centered around math. So in ninth grade, I did self-study. Well, not, I had a mentor for learning abstract algebra with the college student. In 10th grade, I did a sort of joint CS and math theoretical CS sort of camp, and that was 5 weeks long. That was online because of COVID. And I think both those camps had a really good foundation for me. You know, they weren't like research, they weren't specifically preparing for competitions, but they were just learning more about math and I sort of realized, oh, I'm super interested in this. And I was able to continue that momentum throughout the school year. And then in 11th grade, the summer after 11th grade, going to 12th grade, I did a summer program called Promise. And so that was a really fun camp. You have to apply for it by doing a problem set. Usually it's like open for 2 months from January to March. And you pretty much solve a set of problems, you send it in, and they'll accept you based on the quality of like your proofs and how well you can sort of visualize these problems. And so that was a really useful camp for me because it first of all was in number theory, which is a field that I'm pretty interested in. But it also gave me exposure to what higher math looks like. So they connected math to like cryptography, they connected it to finance. And these are all sort of things that I'm interested in because I don't want to go into pure math. I want to go into like some sort of like applied field. And then another good thing about Promise is that you have the option of also doing research. So I was able to write an expository paper and sort of get used to the idea of what it feels like to contribute to research, which I think is definitely a really good experience. I never did research during the school year, which I sort of wish I did. But I'd say using your summers is really important for college admissions in general. And not even just for that, just sort of like honing in on a passion or discovering that you don't like something, I think is super important to either like take a class or like shadows people or just sort of do something in the fields that you're interested in so you can learn more about that.
So from the year you go into high school, like first like freshman year of your high school summer, start thinking about doing something in the summer thing, like whatever interests you, try that interest, and that will help you write the story as well as give you the credentials. I will have the last questions and then I will open it to the audience. So one other common thing that I found in all of you is that you all have leadership positions in school. You are running a club. So how do you go into that? What is the process about? So if you just tell something about the leadership things you did, that's something.
So I've done multiple things very related to math. Actually, in ninth grade, I created my own math YouTube channel, and on that YouTube channel, I would explain like concepts for competition math, competition physics. This was my first like involvement in like a not leadership, but it's more of like a tutorial format. Like I wasn't just a student anymore. I was trying to explain and teach others and help grow their passion for math. So I think this was my first initial path into like trying to be a leader in the STEM community. And I did that. I still do that. I posted like 150 videos, so it's been a long time. But I would say once I got into once I got into like the upper class student, because a lot of the school clubs are not going to take a freshman or sophomore. Just this continued involvement in mathematics really showing this passion and abilities. I was actually voted as the math team captain for my school, and I represented the school there in various local competitions. So I think the best way to try to take a leadership position in any sort of club is really show your passion and your ability. I know in my experience, it was really showing your ability. A lot of these clubs are pretty selective. I know at the Boxford Science Olympiad team, they have elections for officers, but in reality, the students pick the officers who get the highest scores, who have the best ability. So there is a component of leadership, like you have to be a likable person, you have to be able to speak well, and you have to be able to like guide the people around you. But you also have to have the skills to support it. Nobody wants to listen to somebody who can't do the things that they preach. So I think that was a very important thing to keep in mind. And it was a similar thing. I did fencing with the Worcester Polytechnic team, and I took a leadership role there, even though I was like the youngest one there. That was really based off this skill. So key thing I want everyone to take away is that you really got to build your skills if you want to go for a position of leadership. No leader cannot back up their skill, or no good leader cannot back up their skills.
I think I would agree where leadership in the college admissions process doesn't necessarily mean getting up in front of a podium and speaking to 100 people and like inspiring them to go take the city. It means more like just standing out in whatever you're doing and being a leader in that. So like he was saying, for him, it was being the best at math or fencing. For me, it was like just whatever I was doing it to the best of my abilities. And then for me, actually, a lot of the things that I did throughout high school, I kind of started myself. So I had a startup, I had a nonprofit that I was already a part of, but I started a separate initiative within it. And because of that, I sort of was thrust into those leadership roles, but I did have to learn how to sort of have those leadership skills of delegating and getting others to work with you. So I think the most important thing is to just, whatever you're doing, be passionate about it, stand out in it. And like he was saying, I think his like point is really, really great, that you'll just become a leader sort of in itself. People will follow you if you're kind of already stand out in what you're doing.
I agree with that. Like my leadership experience was just pure like enjoyment from myself. So like what happened was my friend, she was like, "Hey Sanah, why don't we go to this meeting? It's the Human Rights Club." I was like, "Okay, sounds like whatever, like a waste of an hour after school." But I went, and I had way more fun than I thought I would. And I stayed for that whole year. So this was my sophomore year. Then junior year, most clubs like have elections. Became president of the club. And, this Human Rights Club, it was very much centered around like talking about things like abortion rights and like Black Lives Matter movements, things like that, which I wasn't like super like involved with before I joined the Human Rights Club. And obviously I'm Indian, I really like my culture. So I was like, why don't we do a fundraiser? And so I led the club and we had this huge event. It was called Chop Masala, and we raised like I think $1,000 for a nonprofit organization. And that was really important to me. And we had like 200 kids from our school come in and help, like they started dancing, like they were all just helping raise money. It was a fun night and there was food. It was a really good event. And so that was actually what I ended up writing my Common App essay about. And so things like that, where like it didn't start off like, oh, I want to join this club because like I think it'll look good on my resume, but it was this thing that I did for myself. And then in the end, you look back and you're like, okay, that was something that, I shined there. I showed people like, what was important to me. And I was out of my comfort zone there. Like I was like talking to like 200 people, and I was like that wasn't something I do normally, but I was passionate about it, so I did it. So I think that really helped me.
Yeah, so I think like, as I'm gonna just echo what everyone else has been saying, I think you really need to find something that you're super passionate about and something that you're willing to do like pretty much all the time. like something that you always want to put your energy to. So that doesn't just mean like showing up for the club meetings. That means like, okay, I'm really interested in this. How else can I pursue this passion that I have? And what are other avenues that I can take this in? So for me, I'll give an example. Mine was education. I've always really liked like teaching others and sort of spreading my love for math or CS or whatever to younger kids. So I'd say in ninth grade, I just started off in my robotics team. Part of robotics is not just building the robot, but you also have to do outreach for younger students. So I got a lot of exposure to teaching that way, and that's sort of how I realized, I really like teaching. And then sort of COVID happened, right? And then I realized I don't think kids are enjoying math as much like online. How can I sort of alleviate this problem? And so I care about math, I care about education. So that led me to create like this sort of math class where I not just wanted to teach kids who are interested in math, but also rope in younger kids who don't like math. And so that took a lot of effort because I had to design this curriculum from scratch that isn't just like boring math. It has to be sort of fun, right? To engage the kids. And so, but I was always willing to do that. And I had a lot of fun doing that. And I think that's the key. You have to have fun in doing whatever you want to do, because that means you're going to put so much more energy. You're going to like it a lot more, and you're going to become a leader, and because you know so much about it. So I ended up doing that. And so I cared a lot about education and math. And so separately, I was part of like the technology help desk at my school. This has nothing to do with leadership. I would just show up twice a week and help teachers and stuff with their technology issues. But during that time, I had a lot of downtime, and I was like, okay, not all my time is helping like teachers and students with their tech problems. How can I put my time to better use? And so I was just scrolling my email, and I saw there's like this opportunity for joining the Massachusetts, serving on the board of education for the Massachusetts Board of Education as a student representative. And so you need a sponsor teacher for that. So the teacher who sponsored me for the help desk program was actually able to guide me through the process for becoming one of the elected members for serve on the Board of Education. And I didn't just do that just because it sounds cool. I actually really cared about wanting to bring education reform to especially in math. So I joined that. And that was not just serving my school, but that was also serving the greater Boston region. And that's plenty of schools. So I think you just have to find something that really gets you going, that you're willing to devote a lot of your time to. And you should have fun doing it. I think that's the key. You have to have fun doing it.
So the key takeaway that I got, as all of you have said, that when you are going for colleges, especially good colleges, few things recipe wise, SAT, good GPA, by default you have it, right? So the extra things that we can work on is our essays. We should make our essay unique as much as possible. Try to take as much AP courses to show our interest. Do something meaningful in our high school summertime, so that we can first I can filter it out what I need, what I want to do, and things like that. And then leadership, again, something to as a hobby, what you are doing it, something that you are passionate about, having fun outside the academia, do that. So those are the points that I think I summarize it. But I can open the floor for question for the audience. If they have some questions, they can ask. So Sid.
Hi, Sid. I'm from AV in Westborough. And you guys have talked about a lot of what you do on your extracurricular and things like that. And we also talked about the essays, but there is a section in the application where you can talk about your activities. And you have to be really concise there. So I have a two-part question where when you describe your activities in that section, what strategies did you employ to kind of present the work that you did on your best foot, or did you give a quick summary of your activities in that section and then expand on that later? What was kind of the dynamics?
I can take that. So I think, as with every part of the college application, you want to be memorable. So everything is an opportunity for you to stand out. So I think the key is to use your activities to stand out. So for me, I did math team, but so are like a million other kids doing math team. So what did I do in the math team that is maybe different than others? So I think you have to find what you did within each club that sort of other people maybe haven't done, or phrase it in a way that shows that you're unique. So for me, that wasn't just doing the math competitions. That was actually organizing the team's participation in competitions that we've never gone to before. And so that, from a million kids who do math team, that's significantly less who are doing what I'm doing. So I think you have to really think about, what you contributed to the club, and find a way to stand out so that you're not blending in with the other people who are doing the same activities.
And one thing I will say is you have a very limited space for what to write, but what I didn't use at work think one of my guys could do is, you know, where like it says like name, like your role or whatever, like there's like a certain number of characters out there. If you can elaborate a little bit more specifically on what you did, like instead of just saying I was president for this many years, right? That like then you don't have to say like in the blurb part like, oh, I did this for 4 years, because you already said that, right? So like really utilizing space in each area can help. And then like what he said, like there's no part of your Common App application where you should be generic. You know, every single part, because there's such a limited amount where they're getting to know who you are, it should say something about you, who you are, and how you're different.
I didn't early on. I was like, how do I use this? It's kind of similar to what you're saying. It really didn't make a lot of sense. How do I put in so much of what I've done? Like, for example, with my startup, it was like I did this for almost a year and a half. I did all of this into one little section. And so one thing I did was like in that role where it says like name of whatever you did. So I put my startup's name in and I said like, hey, it's an edtech startup and this and this. So later in that section, I didn't have to put anything. Instead, what I did was I put measurables of the impact that it had. So we won X amount of dollars. We recruited like X amount of advisors or this and that. And then I also sort of wrote out actively the things I did. So I was chief marketing officer of that startup, though. Because of that, I had interviews with actual administrators in schools. I worked with other ed tech entrepreneurs and things like that. So I put those things in there so that they can know what actively measurables. And I think like actions are really important to put. And for question about what you should put in your essays in contrast or comparison, I think really try not to repeat anything you put in that activity section. Essays, they should be as much as you can completely different and unique, because every part of the application, like I said, is an opportunity to reveal a different facet of yourself. Like one thing I did that I don't recommend a lot of others do, I think it worked because it's a very personal part of the application. But in my personal statement, I wrote about the founding of my nonprofit, why I started it. And, you know, on the surface, it might seem like that's like repeating because I also put my nonprofit in my activity section, but it did reveal like another dimension of me because I didn't just start it to start it. I started it for a very personal reason. And so in that way, you want to try and make it so even if you talk about it, you're revealing something completely different that was not in the activity section at all if you're writing about an activity.
Essays are for subjective, like these activities are for objectives. So with me personally, included like numbers, exact positions, like all the details. So for instance, one activity is Boy Scout. I could have just said, okay, I was a scout for this many years. But yeah, you could say, okay, Eagle Scout, 500 hours with me. We help these associations, blah, blah, blah. These kinds of like objective details are gonna be more memorable and more like unique than just Boy Scout. There are millions of Boy Scouts. There are less Eagle Scouts. There are less Eagle Scouts who do this 20 hours. There are less Eagle Scouts who do this kind of thing. And with the essay, you can talk about the subjective factors. Like, how did it make you feel? How did you feel? These kinds of details. Capturing both.
Maybe just one more thing to emphasize the memorability part. I think like a good rule of thumb, especially for essays, is sort of applies to activities list, but not as much. If a sentence can be written by someone else, it's probably better to like replace it because you really want to make sure that you're coming out and that'll make sure that you're more memorable and that you stand out to the admissions officers.
Anyone else have questions? Yes. Yes, sure. Nothing. Yes.
Let me just say, SAT score, there's a lot of. I mean, how would you think score counts with like a key to barrier? That was the question. And the second question is, you apply for the skill school, right? You get admitted. When you select the school list, do you say like five which are whatever for safety or safety, and then the rest is how to pick and choose that
I think right now, to be completely honest, in the college admission process, the SAT matters less than I think ever has. Where it's, you know, maybe 5-10 years ago, if you got a 1600 on your SAT, you're guaranteed to get top schools. Versus now, you know, you can get a very good score. It doesn't really guarantee anything. Like we've kind of said, it looks good, and if you get that score, then absolutely go for it. If not, I think almost every top school is now test optional, and if there are now, some are becoming test optional this year. I don't know if that trend is gonna hold in the next 3 or 4 years. I've heard some people say it's gonna go back to the SATs gonna become very important. But the truth is right now it's like very saturated and it's not really valued that highly. So I would say don't kill yourself or, spend so much time trying to get a good SAT score. If you can do it, like for me, I got it out of the way very early. And so I got my score. I was happy with it. But I don't think I would have, done so much, like put in that, or if I had, it wouldn't have been worth it to put in that much effort into getting an amazing SAT score because it really doesn't separate you as much as it used to. So, but I think at the same time, of course, it's valuable. But yeah, that's.
To add on to that, pretty much you gotta beat the 99% threat, which is about 15, 20, 15, 30. And a lot of even top schools don't even care if someone does that. This actually surprised me as well. But Stanford's average accepted SAT is only like a 1480. So as you can see, like you have to be good, but between like 80 points, like not even 80, Stanford is like 120. After you're in that 98, 99 percentile, they don't care. They'll take you, they look at everything. And it's the same thing with GPA. You gotta just pass that initial 98, 99% filter, and then after that, you don't care.
And what I will say is have faith in yourself. I have a friend who got into the University of Pennsylvania and Ivy League school. Her SAT score was a 1330. So she went test optional, right? Like obviously she didn't submit that, but someone, if you told me those stats, would be like, oh, you're probably not gonna get in. She did, she had a great essay, she believed in herself, her activity showed. And so she still got into the university she wanted to go to. So that was the reverse kind of story. And then your second question, like your safety schools, I would say you should have one school where you 100% know you're gonna be going to college, right? So for me, that was the school like 20 minutes away where I was like, worst case, I'm just gonna commute. I don't have to pay the dorm tuition or So that was my faith. And then I was like, I'll maybe 1 or 2 more public schools in Massachusetts. And then after that, I was kind of more like targeting like my root schools, like that I'm probably not going to get into. But what I would say is if you know for sure you would be okay going to the safety school, then you don't need that many. If you don't like the safety school you're choosing, then maybe have a few more. So it really depends on you, which colleges you see yourself going. Because I think you said before, there's no point applying to a college where you know you're never going to go there, right? So even when you're thinking of just safety schools, you want a safety school where you would be okay with yourself there. Even if it's a safety school, are there other things you enjoy at that school? Like, are there things nearby?
Yeah, just to echo that, like the college admissions process is so random that you need to pretty much, when you create your list, you have to be okay with going to any school, right? So that doesn't mean you just pick a safety school and like you're not going to be happy going there. You really have to make sure that this is a safety school that you're going to enjoy because, in all honesty, like you have no way of predicting which schools you're going to get in. That being said, sort of the approach that I took, like a lot of advice that I heard is, have an equal balance between reaches, safeties, and targets. And sort of, I kind of didn't agree with that because I wanted to spend more time in my application on like the reach or target schools than the safety schools because I thought that those required more time and I didn't want to spend more time, allocate more of my time to safety schools. So I think it's actually a personal decision, like what are your goals and where do you want to see yourself going and how much time you think you'll need per application. If you're not applying to that many schools, then I would say maybe have an equal balance. But if you're applying to a lot of schools, then I think you have more freedom to apply to say more reaches than safeties, for example.
Have questions?
So, I don't really have a huge idea of what I want to do, and I've explored a couple of fields and talked to some of my cousins or just family friends that are in college of their fields and kind of getting an idea of what they're doing. But for someone that's doesn't really know what they want to do, I'm taking certain APs, but they're kind of all over the place. So is there anything that I can do, or any place I can get exposure to what I want to do, or how to kind of narrow it down?
I think the easiest way to go about that is figuring out what you don't want to do. Experience is experience, do whatever, you see this internship or summer camp, you're like, oh, okay, that looks kind of cool. Do it. Not everything you do has to be tailored towards your resume, your application, right? Don't think like that. Think about your experiences, right? So you go and you do this camp. you might not want to go in the field, but that doesn't mean your time there isn't useful, right? Like you're still having an experience, a solid experience, you're meeting new people, you know, so like that can still show in your essays, you know, in your application. It doesn't have to just be like if you're going into medicine, you don't just have to do medicine related things, right? And so, you know, you get slowly, you narrow down things. Like I didn't pick my major until like halfway through junior year. That was like through like my AP studies course. I was like, oh, okay, I really like the brain, this, that, right? But like you have time, and like I have a younger sister who has no clue what she wants to do, but she's narrowed it down. It's like, okay, I don't want to go into art, I don't want to go into medicine. Like so, like slowly and slowly, if you start like crossing things out, I think you will get there.
Well, because like I said, I kind of still don't really know exactly what I want to do now. I think it's business or maybe finance related. But early on, and even when my application started, so there's 2 rounds of applications, just for like contact. There's early action or early decision, which is in November, and regular decision, which is in January. So in all my early action applications, I applied for engineering actually. And then after those applications went out, I took some time and I was working on my new civil, and I was like, I really don't want to do engineering. And I kind of knew that based off my past internship that I did that summer, but I was really kidding myself. And so finally I switched to business and I was like, this is something I want to do because I think it's something I see myself in. And so based off that experience, my advice would be don't kid yourself. Don't lie and say, oh, I'll do this because, you know, my parents do it, or I'll do this because it makes a lot of money, or I'll do this because it'll look cool. Like do something because you want to do it. And like you said, do things. And if you don't like them, then don't be scared to just stop doing them. Like for me, I did debate. Early on in my career, I was the youngest kid at my school to qualify for the Tournament of Champions. And so I had a lot of success with it early on, but I kind of like public policy, those things, it just, for me, after a certain point in time, it felt like convoluted and redundant, and I didn't really want to do it. So then that's when I decided, okay, let me try this entrepreneurship startup thing. And that's when it seemed like I kind of found something that I was a lot more interested in. So you really just take the time to explore yourself. Don't be like worried that, oh no, how's this going to look on my resume? Because what I did, I told that story that throughout high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just really curious about a lot of different things. And then eventually through the experiences, through me trying different things, now I know what I want to do. So.
And going off that, one thing I would say is don't be like, me, my senior year of high school, right? This is after all my college apps submitted. I had no kind of tie to applying college. I was like, I want to try something new. I've never really explored business at all. I joined DECA my senior year of high school. I really enjoyed it. And, you know, through that, I was like, you know what, maybe, you know, I'm studying medicine later on. I want to do something administrative or whatever. But that experience was really useful. So like, it was something completely different. Did not show up once on my Common App, but like, I really enjoyed it. So you don't have to always, you know, do things just for like the future or what you want to do, right?
I would also say like don't feel pressured because you still have you're going to sophomore year, and I think the worst thing you can do is take pressure and sort of fit this mold. You think it's gonna be better for you the admissions thing. I would say that's gonna do the exact opposite because if you're not gonna like it, then it sort of works against you because you're just gonna be hating every moment of it. You're not gonna do as good of a job. So I'd say you still have plenty of time. It sounds like you're doing the right things. You're going to clubs. You're doing all sorts of things to sort of discover yourself. Right? I'd say continue that. And even though the college admissions process is like kind of random, there's still understanding that we're all like 18-year-olds who may not know exactly what we want to do for the next, whatever, 60 years of our life. And so I just say, take your time and just sort of do things, whatever you do, sort of put all your energy into it. And if it turns out you don't like doing that, well, then you know what you don't want to do. So I'd say just don't take the pressure.
I would say a slight warning though. You should explore and you should try to identify what you don't like, but don't count anything out. If you asked me 3 years ago what I thought about computer science, I would have said I hated it. Because that's I would say this is a problem in many schools. This stuff is not standardized, and sometimes you're just gonna have a bad syllabus. We're just gonna explain things really poorly. Like remember back in like 9th, 10th grade, I thought computer science was APCS, and that is just not the case. So I would highly encourage you to not take what the teachers are telling you about, and really explore it on your own, because you're gonna find often a lot of more interesting things about the subject. You might actually see what you enjoy it more after you like do your own personal investigation, rather than just relying on what the school tells you. Like algorithms, time complexity, all this stuff is in computer science. In school, we just have APCS, memorize some JavaScript. So you gotta be open and you have to really look through the subject before you decide it's not, or it is for you.
Mayuresh, I have a question.
So I have a very correct and then popular. So on one school, I think they went to one session 1 year, and they apparently have very high ratings on what they did. So did you anyone get it? Was it good, bad compared to the school? Get inspired person.
Academy is actually, yeah, it is a very good resource. I think the one thing is that it lines up pretty well. I think they have a lot of AP courses on there. So if you have APs or if you study APs like people do, it is a very good resource in SAT. It's a very good resource. I would say for me, I didn't rely on it too heavily because there's sometimes for me, but at the end of the day, like the content on there is really, really good. So I would say use it for what you need. So if you need it for SAT, definitely use it. I self-studied AP Calculus my senior year. So for that, I used it a ton because everything's free and it's, you know, very well structured to match the course. So it worked really, really well. But, you know, I would say don't make it like your sole source of content, educational content. Like, you know, when I did pre-calc a few years back, I used organic chemistry tutor. He's this YouTuber, very popular, and he explained concepts, you know, a lot better, in my opinion, and it just worked better for me back then. So use Khan Academy, it's a great resource, but also look for other ones if they might fit your situation or your need better, because it's not the only one out there. So.
In general, I'm a pretty big advocate for self-studying, but I definitely agree with what Agam's saying. Khan Academy is pretty good. They have great videos. But I would say if you're trying to learn, it depends on what you're trying to learn. So for example, I think for certain math things, it might be better to just read a textbook because it'll give you more like foundational understanding. And Khan Academy is good, but they might be doing easier problems. And it might not give you the whole big picture of what's going on. If you're looking for like specific AP classes, I can tell you, I think Khan Academy is really good for AP economics because my economics teacher actually used to give us homework assignments, watch this Khan Academy video, come to class and talk about it. So there's definitely merits to it. Obviously, there's other resources besides Khan Academy. I'd say just use your own judgment. Like what do you think is covering it like comprehensively and challenging you and stuff like that.
Yeah, actually, wait. This room is full of IIT graduates. And one thing I found out is that honestly, the way that my dad told me to study, textbook, notebook, this stuff dominates the standardized education and even the national Olympiads. I remember I was studying on the literally just working for running with my dad. So a lot of the old techniques, doing all this stuff, you can clear goal division. All this stuff was just standard, pencil with paper, notebook, read a textbook, like detail by detail. A lot of these old techniques work well. You don't have to like. Now we have the luxury on a bunch of YouTube videos and stuff. It made it really easy actually. But the old techniques still work just fine. Still, competition like national Olympiad. So I think you guys know what you're doing.
So one thing that Sanjeev can emphasize more on that if you can have a chance to participate in some competition, like as Rick is saying about Science Olympiad, Math Olympiad, because those are the tests which are national level competitions. If you score on them, you already be filtered by college that you are on that. Like Rick is also a national merit finalist, which is in top 300 of his last year. So that definitely put him in some category of good students, like when college application look for essays. So again, if you can do some competition things, I highly recommend that. I think that's a process. I have not experienced that, but people who have experienced that can add on that had a value on the admission process. So yes.
I just wanted to give you a parents very nice speech. Just as a parent and as a mom, I felt like Sanah is our older for our first generation here. We feel like we grew up with our children, so we learn how things are going. I felt like our senior year and to senior year, right? We were the same way, asking a lot of questions, meeting a lot of people, trying to get as much information as we could. looking back, I felt as a family, maybe we spent a little bit more time together. So, when we get all this information, when she's getting information that I'm getting my information, my husband is getting his information, but maybe like coming together as a family and talking to each other, because dinner tables, they don't, like senior year, right? It's like so busy, like sports and everything. So I feel like having some time to connect as a family is also very important, knowing exactly what you want, how to do it, which college to go. Like when I came in junior year, and was like, I want to go to California. First thing I did was I booked tickets to San Francisco. And like, what was I thinking, right? So we did go there. We had nice vacation, and then after 3 months, he's like, I don't want to go. So things will happen. I think it's good to kind of connect ourselves. And then another experience which has happened, I think January and February in senior year are kind of stressful months. Of course, like, golden child, golden stuff, everything works out great, excellent. And for some people it does. But this is a time when a lot of acceptances come in. A lot of people get into that A school and it's great. And we want to all these people. There are definitely some people who don't get it. It is a very hard time. Trying to be that supportive for each other, and especially for those children who didn't get in the first try. It's okay. Sometimes they get waitlisted, sometimes they get deferred. But in the end, everything works out. So just want to get that.
The state is the parent of Arjun.
So I think one thing which I had no idea, right? And it was validated when we actually went into the right? At times we think our kids can do certain things, but we don't. Right? But when I was in the like the admission officer or this was the orientation here, right? They said like a lot of and how she was talking to the kids when we had it. Gail doesn't want a diverse student. They are looking for a diverse class. They understand that 18-year-old will not have the 100 things that they want. They want those 100 things, but they are looking for that classroom in understand. Sometimes, it's okay to be pointy, have your passion about something, it's okay to have a few more passions, but don't take the pressure to be good at 100 things, which is humiliating. So try to start figuring out. I still remember like it was the freshman year, right? And he was very good in soccer, like 18, and I thought he's gonna play fast again. He's making choices which sport he wants to play. And that's the one thing which I knew that it was tough that I'm not gonna do. And that was like I need to be pointy and just trying to focus on this. We have to start making choices. It doesn't depend when you make those choices. I don't know you choice, but don't take the pressure. The thing is, whatever you do, you put the effort, what stuff will happen. Just don't take the pressure. Just try to keep the environment very stress-free as much as possible and support each other. That is the key. I think that the pressure of doing a lot at times something like this. That's my perspective.
So I have a question. Visit the colleges. That visit like reflect in your decision, and if so, how?
So I actually visited a lot of colleges, and I think visiting before applying was like this kind of like hype thing, like, oh, like if you go, like you'll know it better, right? And honestly, I don't know if that's true. Like I think like some schools, I didn't get an appointment to like have an actual tour, so I just went to go. And like looking back, like honestly, like that wasn't really worth it. Like I don't think it makes sense to just go for no reason. Like if you don't have a tour, if you do have a tour, I think it is worth it. Like you get a tour guide, you can ask questions. It also shows demonstrated interest, so that can help. But I think the main thing is after you apply, right? So now you get into like 3 or 4 schools, right? And you have to narrow it down. Say you have like top 2. Go to each school, the environment, the shops nearby, like the restaurants nearby. Like, is there a Taco Bell? Like, that. Like, there's a Panera Bread near Westborough. Things like that. Like, you don't get to know that by just like, kind of looking on a map. So like, I think after you apply and get in, that's the best time to visit. You can visit before, and I think if you're like EDing somewhere, you should definitely visit before. but it's not like a must. Like, I don't think you should like feel like you're behind if you're not visiting, because I did visit and I don't think that really helped me in any way.
Yeah, I would agree. Uh, Sometimes it can help, like, especially I agree if you get a tour, like we went to Tufts and we took a tour there and I kind of after the fact, I realized like, I don't really love this place. Like I thought it was nice, but for me, it didn't really seem like the greatest fit. I actually never toured Emory before applying ED2 because it is in Atlanta, but I got to sort of right now, there's a lot of online resources. You can do a virtual tour. And for me, with the tours that I did do, what they were beneficial for was seeing what that college values about themselves. Because if those same values are reflected within yourself, then it becomes a lot easier to say, yeah, I think I can see myself going here. Like now for Emory, for example, after the fact, as I'm preparing to go to campus, they're doing a lot of stuff about community and belonging and things like that, trying to get students acclimated. And that's something that I do value, is making sure that my peers and myself are comfortable. So like that turned out well versus, you know, a different school might be super, all they talk about on the tour is internships and this and that. And for some people that might be really important for them. For me, it really wasn't. So they might be able to decide based off that. But the thing is, now you can get so many of those things online. Don't overextend yourself trying to tour, but if you can, it's never gonna hurt.
I think this is a person to person decision. Actually, I have a funny story. I remember back when I was applying to college, my mom was asking me, hey, do you want to tour around the school? And then my response is like, hey, Dad, after you got to IIT, or no, before you got to IIT, did you tour IIT? And he said no. And I'm like, okay, no. But I mean, there's a big culture shift, right? How it is in India and how it is in the US. I think is that for some people, it is like valuable to try to understand, hey, this is university mathematics vibe or something. I mean, personally, for me, I've learned that wherever you go, you gotta try to adapt to it. You gotta make the most of it, and you gotta learn to grow with the school. So that was kind of the approach that I took. But I understand it may not be the same. So I think that's really a personal first. Do you think you're the type who wants to grow to achieve, like wants to grow to the school, wants to find a school that's like that's what you should think about.
I think you should definitely look into this colleges, see if they track demonstrated impact brought up earlier. None of the schools that I applied to or that I was interested in cared if you visit the school. So I hadn't really visited any schools. But I'd say if you're doing ED or if the school does care, then you should definitely visit. One thing I will say is, as we said earlier, it's important to like visit the schools after you get in, right? I will say many schools will have like an admitted students like programming. I would say definitely try to visit once more besides that too, because what your experience during that admitted students like program is not going to be like representative of what it's going to be like to actually be a student there. And also what I would say is in place of maybe visiting the schools, I would definitely recommend like reaching out to like alumni from your high school who are going to that school. That's definitely where I got a lot of my information from instead of visiting the school. So definitely use your connections that way, because I think you can learn a lot more from talking to people, because they can tell you stuff that maybe the admitted students programming will try to hide from you, right?
Yeah, and going off of that, so I actually, before Case Western, I was really interested in going to the University of Washington, which is like all the way in Seattle, right? So that was like a big kind of like con for me, like I didn't want to go that far. So like I reached out on Instagram to like a bunch of like freshmen, sophomores, juniors who were like doing the same thing as me. And the response I got from all of them was, it's stressful. I don't really like it here. You have to apply into your major, like all those kind of things. I was like, okay, this is definitely not the school for me, right? So like I think like we talked about reaching out before you're applying, even after you've applied, after you've gotten in, reaching out to strangers helps like make your decision.
So on that point, like I want to say that if you guys are thinking about applying in next couple of years, have the contact information of these 4 students, so at least they can be a starting point for that. You don't have to search for internet.
So no, I am moving careful with that. Well, what is for the from a deep black it's all important. So you have to be a little considerate. I'll say, for me, I want to go to school out there, so I keep the minute for that time and saving money. You to maybe paying again a master's and or just going for free education. I wasn't. So that's why me Carnegie Mellon graduated and then that was why I left. I get to save money and I get to grow in my degree. I think that was a big like you have to think. You want to Do you want to get all your thing done? You want to pay your rent upfront? It really depends on your long term. I think for grad school, if you're planning to go to grad school, save some money, undergrad, because like after undergrad, probably you don't want to down. Well, but if you're just going to undergrad out there, then you could probably pay it up. Like it depends what your long term is. And for me, it was in my favor to take it a little easier, like take a little easier from the money and time during undergrad. Because I want to go for.
I agree with that. I was actually pretty set on going to a public university because those tend to be way less. Right? So I was pretty set on that, and then I probably wouldn't have even like considered Case Western if it was like its original course. They did give it a scholarship, so that's kind of the main reason I also chose it. So I think like money's always important if you're and what you said really depends what you're trying to do after. Like if you know after you want to do more schooling and you're gonna be paying that from your own pocket, like you don't want to spend like 90K a undergrad, but you have the money and like, a good school never the prestige is always.
I have a question regarding internship. Like, how do you find internship? Is there a common platform where you can find all sorts of?
For me, I just reached out to people. Like, so one thing I learned throughout high school, and especially that side of things I talked about earlier, is networking is super important, not just in high school, but here has experience networking. It's super important. So my first internship I got because I sort of reached out to her completely on my own, developed a connection with her, and she's thinking over at that company. With her, I worked closely, and then after the fact, she just said, "Hey, this summer." Whereas early on, when I wanted to do astrophysics, I started by just emailing a bunch of professors at Tufts. But we have actually, like, I guess, a family friend who is a professor at Tufts, and so we through him, he just made the connection. Hey, this is email, and then from there I set it up. But the really important thing is getting to sort of personally get into contact with a person if you're interested in doing research, and then like professional, like at a company or something like that. I guess applications is my best bet. I never had to do anything like that, so I think networking is the biggest thing I can.
Also, if networking is probably the best way, but also your school does help, depending on the school. Like I know a strong school like Lexington or maybe like a private school, they're going to connect you. If you're going to a lower performing school district, you're going to take more self-initiative. Like I remember when I was starting out, AP doesn't provide too much support to the students, so I called the punished it. But it really depends on the school you're going to. Going to like I know schools like Phillips and they have like professors, and you tell them they're Phillips Andover, they're going to work with you. Really depends on your school's options, but I think the best way, like, networking, reaching out of your own age, and that's also a good way to build skills for the future. Because in college, a lot of that is based off own initiative.
And I'd say an easy way to get started, it's really worth taking a LinkedIn even like, because that's a place where you can see, okay, like these people have gone to my school, they're working in a company that I'm in, then maybe I can reach out to them that way. But I think it's super useful to connect with alumni because they're going to be so much more willing to help you. And that's the way a lot of these high school have really, it's through connections. It's less about like, are you qualified or about like, do you know the people? So you have to find someone who's willing to vouch for you, willing to mentor you perhaps. And I think LinkedIn, maybe just like, if you know your alumni some other way, that's
I think you were mature enough, but did your parents also pitch in on how much contribution your parents made?
Oh, big driving force. And I works in education. Even if I slack off on that, it's like okay. No matter what, even now, I'm like, they call it, I didn't know, like, taking the top CS, and you're like, Dean's list every time, and then just see it. And then my mom is family, he's putting me in the other rooms. You gotta branch out. You can't just sit in a cubicle all the time and let others take credit for your ideas. So both of them were pushing me in each direction, showing me like the benefits of both life. going into your own business ideas. So I'll say, personally, for me, my parents have shaped a lot of my own ideas of what I want to pursue in the future. So I think parents do have a huge role in that. Of course, they didn't write the application for me, and they didn't pick my major for me. But I think like this shaping, saying your own experiences, maybe helping them on a math set, or helping them this really cool identity. This kind of stuff builds interest, and over the years, these interests become the student's own. It's a guidance. It's a fine balance. You can't force your ideas onto them, but you can guide them and teach them from what you know. And I think that's what my parents have taught me.
I think throughout high school, probably the most important thing that my parents did is like support me, and I think that I'm really grateful to them for that. Without, if they were like always, like if they weren't supportive, they're always like scolding me or something, I don't think I'd be able to do like other stuff, right? I'd be so like I'd be so pressured all the time. So I think it's really important for parents to be like encouraging and like not always create like a stressful environment in the home or something like that, because we're already going through so much stress. And I think another thing that was really helpful about my parents is they let me own like my decisions. Like they didn't like tell me this is what I have to do, this is the sort of path that they let me sort of figure out my own path, and they were supportive every step of the way. And yeah, I think that's good stuff.
I think that's a really good point of just add like obviously the best thing I think is let us, I guess, kids grow on their own accord. I think my parents really did that for all of my high school career as a kid. It was, whatever you do, just do it to the best of your ability, and what good things will come. And like the one time my dad tried to get me to do engineering, he's from IIT, right? He started in engineering and then he went into marketing. So he tried to get me to do engineering, and I like wrote those applications and I did not like it at all. Like those applications turned out, in my opinion, there were some of my worst ones because it wasn't really authentic. So like, I guess, yeah, let them be themselves, especially in these applications. And you can give advice, you can say, it's probably better if you do this, because you guys obviously all have a lot of real world experience that we don't have. We don't understand some of the things that you guys have learned over the years. So give that knowledge, but let them make their own decisions, and just support them, and like let them find their own path, I guess. I think that's just always very helpful, especially in this type of process, because the whole point, at least for me, of college applications was I just learned so much about myself. Like I said before, that introspection had just never happened in my life. And through that, I learned a lot of things. I learned I didn't want to be an engineer. I learned I want to help people. And I learned all these other things. And it wouldn't have happened if, my parents had been on my back the whole time saying like, okay, do this now, do this now, do this now, do this now. Yeah.
Yeah, and going off of that, like, starting the whole college thing, like, my parents, like, I'm the oldest child, they were all, like, we were all just, like, no one knew what to do, right? And so, like, I think, like, the biggest thing I leaned on my parents for was, like, I wrote my essay, right? If, like, one of my friends didn't like it, like, whatever my mom chose on, it was fine. If my mom didn't like it, I had to go and change it, right? Like, it was that kind of thing. Like, I kind of lean on them for, like, that final decision. When I'm hitting submit, like, they had to prove it for me, like, no one else, right? So that's kind of what I use them for. But I think it's just funny because like last year, if like I was like, kind of like thinking like, oh, in 1 year from now I'm gonna be sitting here like telling you all about like the college thing, like you just learn so much from it. Like going back, I'm like, oh, okay, I would have done this, I would have done this differently, like whatever. But you can't change it. Like you're gonna make mistakes. Like I think like that's just part of the process. And I think because like you apply to a different number of schools. Like the first school I my application to was October 15th. Probably the worst application I ever submitted. Like I think there were like 6 typos in my essay, like this and that. Like you learn along the way. Like by the end, like the January 1st deadline, I think I submitted the best essay I ever wrote. So like it's along the way. It's a whole learning curve for everyone. Like it's not like you just go in perfect.
I have one more question. Like it's early action better or the regular patients are better?
So what I know is the IIT schools, like, they like to preserve the prestige. Actually, not in the, I'm saying IIT, but most like the schools like to. So applying to them early is the best. It's regular, right? To preserve the prestige, right? For example, at my school, they took a couple people early, but then they never take them again. It's not because the earlier pool was better. Just look at them objectively through their grade, their staff. But they take them early because first off, it preserves their game. When you apply to an Ivy League school early, you're in early decision, which means that if you get done with that. So pretty much with that acceptance, they guarantee first, right? And basically they show that people aren't rejecting their school for other. So EDEA is really a good way to show commitment to the schools, and they like taking you early, because then it's not gonna hurt their game. Them down for anything. Once regular comes around, I would say it becomes a lot more competitive, because at that point, if you get accepted, you can't reject. And you can see this in terms of the stats, right? You check the ED rates at like a bunch of top schools. It's not good, that being said. It's still like under 20%. But 20% to 2% is a pretty big jump. So that's what I found with a lot of the IIT schools. Let's say like the top 5 in some, really far. But I'm saying if you have your mindset on like a pretty select school, applying early is the best way to get in. Because after that, it's that.
Also, for adding to that, there are some schools where you have to apply early for even to be considered for merit scholarship. So for Aagam, he didn't apply early over there in Emory, and later when we got it, we found out to be in the early decision to be even considered for those scholarships. So that's also, I think, very, very important in choosing a school. Is there a deadline for a merit scholarship or any other scholarship?
My recommendation would be, I think, at least in my experience from what I've heard from talking to different people, it's a little bit different where Ivy Leagues actually like their early decision is higher, but a lot of times that's, at least I've heard, because it's legacy or recruited police and things like that apply in those schools. So are like the council we actually talked about the process. He told us that realistically it'll give you like a maybe 1 or 2% chance increase, which isn't anything huge. Whereas some other top level schools, top 20 schools, Emory, NYU, Georgia Tech, schools like that, applying early decision can actually boost. Like I think Georgia Tech's early decision rate was like almost 40%, or something like crazy like that. Where those schools, it's definitely, in my eyes, much more worth it. And again, like you said, not to be considered for more scholarships if you apply early. So do a little bit of research into that, because I would say it's more worth your time to apply to like do early decision. And if they have above a 20% early decision rate, then at least you'll get in, and that's a top school versus like, and because after that opportunity goes away. But if you want to go somewhere like an Ivy or Stanford, you can still do that and apply early. But from what I've heard, it's a marginal increase, like actual likelihood.
One thing that I'll say is I would say my piece of advice is to early where you most want to go. Like, don't try to play the game where, oh, like I'm calculating I have this better chance because these are the statistics from last year. Like, it's totally variable, I'd say. And one of the biggest mistakes is having regrets, I'd say, in the college admission process. You don't want to like ED to a school just because it has a higher thing. You get in and you're like, oh, so what if I could have gone to other schools? And I think that's gonna be something that you're gonna have to live with. And that's something that I kind of follow. Like, I didn't want to bind myself early on. I wanted to have more freedom so that I could, not commit myself to something that I didn't want, that maybe I wasn't comfortable with, or maybe that I didn't know all the time. So I would say definitely apply to your top choice early, no matter like what the stats say. Obviously, there's some amount of like optimization you have to do, but don't over optimize.
I think so.
It actually, like what I've heard, doesn't is at all. It's just showing that school that.
Yeah, but then.
Yeah. Top 5. Game branch. Those guys, like, they don't need to. First, we need to get to a school like Harvard. Lead. Because the time frame.
Remember, it's early decision, class early, and the difference between early decision and what happens if you get it. The early action is we're going to apply in November, and you're just saying that, listen, I'm applying here early. This is my cost. Just showing that to them, and for colleges, it makes it easier for them to process these because they have a longer frame. So, for example, I applied like early action to a couple of schools like UMass Amherst. And it was like, that's fine, because if you get in, you don't have to go, but you're showing that school you want to go there, and you can also get the application out of the way a little bit quicker. Versus early decision is if you get into that school, that means you have to go. So I applied early decision, UPenn. I didn't end up getting in, but then the thing is, like, if I had gone, I would have had to have gone and the fact realized. I think I would have wanted to go to because I've heard, at least from some of my friends that go there, very competitive environment, and that wasn't necessarily what I was looking for in college. For some people, that's how they thrive. So I think I kind of wish I had that versus. And so those are the two early options. Then there's regular decision and regular decision. That's just in January. And it's like it varies. Sometimes it's January 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, all the way up until February 1st. And some others I saw happen. That late bill on instead. And what that just lets you do is it lets you again have that plan. But there's also one more plan there called early decision 2, which is what I applied to with Emory, where I said, even though I applied in January instead of beginning, and I would say if you like early decision is really like Arjun was saying for those schools that you see yourself going there and you would want to go there if you got it. There shouldn't be a question because otherwise you might find yourself in a situation where you want to go somewhere that you want to. There's nothing legally binding about those, but like, I guess kind of if you get in the expectations that you, those are the difference.
And sorry, one is actually now. So one is they're applying program. So the top T20 schools, what they're doing is they are giving opportunities to the students in junior year between March to August. You have to submit your application and they will fly you into their school. And if obviously your application is accepted, and that is just an advanced enrollment. That happens way before the there is another program for the colleges where they actually junior year. Aagam has a program like that where you can actually apply in junior year, and it's not legally binding, but you have a great chance if you're getting it. Obviously, you have to keep up with all the course and everything by the senior year, but you pretty much get into the college. So these are the new things which have come up. So this year, a lot of schools have done this flying program. So when you have to start but if, they will pay for all the expenses, and you are invited to the school, where you go in and you have an opportunity to get in. Way before even the common applicants.
So do you have to teach out to schools? So are you saying it is on their website?
They is on the website, yeah. Yes. Yes. They have their flying programs have become very common now. It's a very it is there. They didn't stop. But now this year a lot of schools are doing it. They are yeah, see SAT is becoming I mean I think even you don't submit it. But if you're trying to strong, submit it.
Talk to your school.
Yes, more places. MIT made it a mandatory last year, but they got it back. But everybody is even Harvard, most liberal arts schools have expected.
Pretty good. For those, but like, very common students were options and how many had actually submitted. Of course, that would be
TDS data actually on a data set for each school. So if you look at those data sets, they will say that how many students submitted. Each school has separate.
We can also look at the
No. That we don't.
if you are submitting
Okay. So if the student only two benefits of this structure. One, obviously, the their egress is high, their acceptance rate is low. Only kids who could apply. Not because they're senior students, but because they're open to market. Eligibility for third earlier to not get into Harvard. So they're getting the application.
Denominator is in.
So that's a good response for them. And then
Thank you. Just one more question and then we can just last question and then we can let
All of you guys come. And you said you were doing like the business together. You got USMO years ago. How much of a role does it play if you're not, let's say you don't, maybe when we get around this. If you don't do that, are you going to apply for stock? Right, so you might be getting like regional or state. Don't get high national ranking awards. How do you get like impact?
So I think I'll say for someone like STM. Well, I remember when I was in college application, my STS application, I think it's important STS application they did on it was just so expensive. But I would say still go in like regional fairs, system participation, and especially there is pretty good. You know, a lot of these regional fairs give you pretty good for people who come $1,000. Don't underestimate the value of these things. They're pretty big deal. And another thing to look into is not only very much I'll honestly say like pushing in IEEE was like some conferences in IEEE are easier to get within than doing anything. So always try to look at within the but always try to produce an annual group.
I think, like, you know, if you have on your application, oh, I did research, I did all these impressive things in STEM, whatever field you went into, no admissions officer is going to look at that like, oh, they didn't get this finalist for this random competition. It's like whatever you present yourself, that's what the admissions officer is going to evaluate. You're not going to necessarily look at it like, oh, but they left this off. That's, I think that's exemplified with the whole SAT thing now, where they're saying it's test optional, which means they're saying that if you don't have it, it doesn't mean they're going to like look at you like a lesser candidate. Okay, it's not there. Let me evaluate what I have. So I think like he's absolutely right that it's going to help you stand out in your field. You should absolutely go for it. But if you can supplement it or replace it with other things that you might enjoy more or you might be better at that might make you stand out more, then absolutely get it.
One tip that I have that I kind of wish I knew, it's to find someone who can like write about that in your applications. Whether that means, I know you're probably talking about independent research, just talk to your teachers about it, because they can write that in your rec, and that actually goes a long way than you just saying it for yourself, right? It's obviously better if you have like a mentor or a professor who's going to write all about your research. But if you don't, as you talk to your teacher, like, oh, I'm doing this, this, and this, you know, but let's chat about it. And I think that's something that I wish I knew, because like I did a lot of stuff outside of school, but like my school teachers didn't really know about it. And I think it could have gone a long way if they knew what I was doing outside of school.
Okay.
How about the other three? You can application like even KMC,
Yeah, so I mean, I can start off. I prepared a lot for math competitions all through high school. I sort of started in middle school with math counts, AMCA, and I sort of worked my way up AMC 10, AME, that sort of stuff. I was never able to make the USMO because that's like a lot of time and kudos to you. But I think all the time that I spent in math competitions was never time wasted. It always taught me to think in like a new way. So for example, I think one side effect of me studying for math competitions, I didn't have to study for the SAT at all. And not just for math, for English too, because it's just logic, right? So I think studying for math competitions in general just teaches you like a good way of thinking. And it also helped me get into like math camps that otherwise probably would not have been able to get into, like Promise. It's not a math competition, but it's like regarded the same as like a bunch of math competitions or selected math camps. So I think definitely studying for Olympiads, and like there's a bunch of resources like the art of problem solving, etc. They have great textbooks, great courses. So that's sort of what I did.
just to, one last one. They are at least fully, district-wise, at least fully first, right, in terms of providing the teaching. It's going to all of you went for lessons like full of math and all of PR or AMC and
So I'd say the majority of my studying was self-studying. I think that was more effective. You know, I tried classes here and there, but I often found that I could probably study the same thing for free faster if I just read the books myself. And I think what I said earlier, the art of problem solving, it really is like a handheld guide to like cracking the Olympiads. And I think if you read that diligently, you can do well in like a lot of art of problem solving. AOPS.
yeah, there is no school program that gets you like in competition, invitational manner. You cannot do that by just. That being said, there are certain tutoring centers like so some gymnasiums and you can just get the topics there. Mathnasium. So I always used to own it. So I had the convenience of going like, you know, bothering a professor, hey, can you explain calculus to me? Like, you know, where are these kinds of overall topics? The thing is, a lot of these competitions are about practice, about like experience, and you can't build that in the class. You have to spend a lot of time working through a textbook, doing all the like problems. You can learn the concepts in a tutoring center, but you cannot do the competitions just with the tutoring center. You have to put a lot of your own stuff out. Like, I think it's like you have to do like at least hundreds of hours to try to perform well at it.
So in terms of the mathematics, I don't know, so just how that impacts the constant students. So every year, around 300,000 students participate in MA10 competition. From there, the next step is the top 2.5% of that 10,000. They qualify for the next level, which is AGNE, which is the American. So you cannot just take the test, you have to be that top 2.5% qualify for the AIT. Then from the top AILE, then the top 500, based on your AIM score and the NC STEM score together, that's called your USA JMO or USA Math Olympiad Index score. So that index score qualifies you for USA Math Olympiad. Okay? So that's almost like top 500 students across USA, they qualify for USA Math. So obviously you can understand, like, you know, it's very, very coveted position at that point. Like, then from that, in the USM, then the top 40 students, they qualify for something called MOP. So you become a MOPper, which is a math Olympiad. So they take you to the Carnegie Mellon and then they train you there for preparing for international math. And then the topmost level is the top 4 of that MOP get into the international math Olympiad presenting in United.
He's been participating in all.
Right. So he has gone to USA, but he did not go to the top 40, which is the MOPper, or the top 4, which is the international team. Now, if you are a MOPper, now just like math, you can do it in any subject. Like physics is another subject, and chemistry. But in any subject, if you are going to camp for MOP, basically that for you're almost like, you know, in MIT, Harvard, or any same school, you are almost like a right carpet there. If you are a MOPper, if you play a top 40 in particular subject, if you are a top 40 in the country in physics, top 40 in the country in mathematics, so you get a red carpet to MIT or Harvard. Obviously, I think like it is even more than that. So that's the thing for math. So math is very, very complicated because, you know, everybody does math starting from their kindergarten. But the one thing that we often not look at is the physics Olympiad track. So in the physics Olympiad track, the kids normally they don't do physics until like they are in senior almost because they haven't done calculus, right? So many schools maybe they don't allow doing physics, and that's the only year they do physics. But if you can start physics early, getting into a physics Olympiad is much more easier than getting into the math Olympiad. because not many students are doing physics, right? So it is less competitive. So in that, first stage is like one of the physics Olympiad. There is also a conducted by the USA Physics Teachers Association Board. They conduct a test for every so which is a mechanics algebra mechanics test. You qualify in that, so and then from there you go to USA Physics Olympiad. So there, I think from the AQ trainer, there are only 2,000 kids who can go to the USA Physics Olympiad. And then the top 300 of that, they make it to USA, like, the top, is it 300 or 300? Is it so top 400 get qualified for the USA Olympiad in that 2,500 or so. And then obviously, like, depending on where you get to the University of bronze, gold, or silver medal. And then the top 40 once again go for that. Once again, if you are a camp physics, almost like guaranteed any of this, like top. And the good thing is that all this, like MIT or even all other colleges application, they actually have specific number line item where you have to put your AIME score. How much will you score in your AIME? How much will you score in your AMC 10? Not all the colleges say, like, but specifically the same schools, more competitive schools, they ask for this AIME score qualification, whether, and also in terms of, like, when you write your top 10 achievement, having this math Olympiad, physics Olympiad, certainly, like, speaks of your like passion for that particular subject, in your excellence for that subject. So those things are really, but obviously, as you can see, it, that is very complex. I mean, I participated in every 10, that does not mean anything. But I qualified for USAM, I qualified for camp. That obviously says a lot. So it's very complicated. So those are the facts. Similar facts are there in US and if someone is interested in bio, you is there as a bio Olympiad. And there also you can go to IPO, bioinformatics college, biology. So these are the different tracks of the Olympiad, which are very.
What is the Olympics actually? I think there are different for publications and all those things, but things for 10 interesting.
Now, one thing I can tell them is like that in other things, like speech and debate. It really depends on not only just you, but your debate partner. Right? And then, like, let's say you are doing robotics, right? You are just not going by yourself, you are going as a team, which is important, like, to have those set work as a team and do. But these Olympiad tracks is solely based on your performance, it's solely based on your knowledge and effort that you have put in. So these things are not dependent on others. So you can, if you are excelling on those things, it can really help you to, like, just based on your skill set. No one can take it out from, like, take away anything from it. So you can just, like, excel in all the facts.
I think we can thanks all the panel members for their time. This is 2 hours, so. From our IT or anything, we have a small token of appreciation. I know you guys will get way more than this in the future, but this is just to start with. So this is my. Perfect. And then if you guys want to have contact of them for future, you can have it. And then any feedback that how we can do it in the future, let us know whether we should continue doing this or any feedback on that regardless.
This is really useful. Let me tell you from a parent perspective. I'm a professor, but I don't know much about that because we studied back in India. Yeah? So that's how we came here for PhD. I mean, we came here for our graduate studies. So mostly we know about the graduate study. We don't know much about how to get in. So this was really eye opener for me. A lot of information I got from here. So thank you, Abhishek, for telling me.
So one other thing. One other thing I just wanted to add is the big IIT community here. And as you were asking, right, getting getting the internship and the research, right? That is very hard thing for students to do. And because especially the parents who are in corporate America, not in academics, right? Getting that kind of connection built, reaching out to a professor or an internship or research. In that, if all our IIT community kind of have something in common, okay, this is one page or one area where you are interested for any kind of research you can post. I think that is where we as parents can try to help the kids. And that is one thing that can give them a lot of advantage in terms of getting exposure to
That's an example now is very important. Even middle school students. Middle school students. I mean, this is something where we come from and back in India. Chalo padhai kar lo, is college mein ghus jao. That's how we come from, right? But this is so, I call this like magic. The US system is a game in itself, especially for the first stage. It's got to be I just wanted the kids are the cons. It's shooting the okay. Now, if the points got fit right, we are good chess players. If not, then we fail. Because it's not the kids' fault. And I see that there are all these things. Everybody is genius. Everybody is good. I don't believe in really geniuses because 99% of the kids are genius. Okay, but it's the effort. It's the opportunity. It's not about because Ray got 4 Olympiads, he's genius. No, that's because he got that opportunity to know what those Olympiads are, and he got in early. He worked towards it. Exactly. So it's nothing genius here. It's just knowing the resources. That is so hard to know here. I work in education actually, and for 10 years I'm doing it. Still say I don't know anything. Because every day, this whole plan to college program, looking at it, I'm like, really? They are paying for our kids to go to the colleges? And this is unique, right? The way is it. I was talking to the last year when we went to the high, talking to one of the parents, and the girl got accepted in Harvard, and this was sometime in September. Okay. Immediately struck me. I'm like, how? Application is not open. How did you get in? So then I thought, okay, suppose sports quota, this different thing. Okay, I know sports quota is there. But I didn't know that they get so much leverage. Not sports quota is there, true. But this is like Harvard gives 300 applications. Like they sent out offer letters to 300 students even before the Common App opens, even before the REA opens. And that's not because they're genius in sport, nothing like that. The girl I was talking to, she just did field hockey. Because obviously I'm a curious person, so I just started asking more questions. Okay, what is the sport, what kind of things and all those things. So she says she does field hockey. I'm like, what's the ranking? So curious, he's a national fencer. And I'm like, okay, we also have sports side, so let's see. I'm like, national level? No, he's not a national level. Then how do you get acceptance even before the Common App? Oh, she had actually contacted the coach 2 years before, and she was in touch with the ice hockey coach from Harvard almost 2 years, and sending all the videos and all those things, and that's her book.
She has been following up with the coach throughout for last 2 years.
Because nothing going on. We see this happening a lot of schools. Lot. We are targeting Harvard because of the company, but lot of schools.
Even schools like Northeastern, they're playing games with it. It's mind blowing. And every year they change it. They change a little bit now. Names here and there. Beautiful.
Yeah. When we talk about all the PR, these people are talking, getting into the same food pattern. And where, like you said, they get into the
Yeah.
I mean, why cannot we do that?
We have the brains, we have the things to do it. We are just lacking this kind of skills and which we should collectively grow. And even the our kids for even for sports. I mean, you're going into sports doesn't mean that you are going for your activities. I mean, this girl who really was difficult to just talking to me about this and people are going to major. Yeah. I'm going for politics and then you come out with design. Yeah. Right? These are two excellent. But these are the games of this. I mean, this thing I have heard that you enter through easy major and then you enter. Exactly. Yeah. That's why I'm saying to choose the subject till like you do more.
So they are getting this of here, which is political science. Choose digit. Use something like just a video. It could have not like you cannot come from
Thank you.
so I think
What's line of that?
it is very good.
Actually,